everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Heather and today I am here to talk you through all the books that I read in April. Now, I know from the thumbnail it looks like I just read one book, but in fact I read 8 books. It was a really good reading month. A lot of them though happened to be digital books, either ebooks or audiobooks. So I'm going to start with my physical book and then work backwards through all of the digital books that I read. So the one physical book that I managed to finish this month was The King's Mother by Annie Garthwaite. And this is the sequel to Cecily, which I read 2 or 3 years ago now. And I really enjoyed it. It's a novel about the War of the Roses, told from the perspective of Cecily Neville. The last book, Cecily, was really wonderful. It's very strongly written. I really enjoyed it. But it got us through mainly the lead up to the War of the Roses, which I'm not as familiar with. This novel took us through the area that I'm much more familiar with. Edward the Fourth, I think, ascending to the throne, marrying Elizabeth Woodville, and everything all the way through. Does it take us through the Battle of Bosworth Field? Not sure. I feel like she might have passed before Bosworth Field actually happens. Oh no, it does take us through Bosworth Field. She lived for an exceptionally long time. For a medieval woman, that is. I really enjoyed this one even more because I understood most of the ins and outs of who was who, what was going on, from having read the Philippa Gregory novels that circle the War of the Roses, and through having read Shakespeare's War of the Roses cycle and watched it. So I had faces to put with names. I also really loved this perspective in that I thought, okay, yes, Cecily is now the king's mother, hence the title. It does work in other characters who also feel that they should be, and at some points are, the king's mother as well, such as Margaret of Anjou, Henry VI's wife, who believes that their son should now be king. Elizabeth Woodville, of course, married to Edward, having children who she feels should now become king. And then, of course, Margaret Beaufort, mother of Henry Tudor. So yes, I really enjoyed this novel as well. I think it was a great follow-up to Cecily, and I like that she gave us background on what happened to all of the various characters after the novel ends as well as giving us a clue about a new book and new scholarship that is coming out about the princes in the tower, which was very exciting to multiple people in my family. Apart from that, as I said, I did read a lot of ebooks. I had a few ARCs come in and library holds. And due to many issues with my car, I've been listening to a lot more audiobooks than usual because I've been listening to them while I'm driving as well. Won't get into the ins and outs, but I've been having a rental for a while that has terrible radio stations, but I can link my audiobook. So of the ARCs that I received this month, the first was A Gentleman's Offer by Emma Orchard. Now, I've read one other book by Emma Orchard so far, which was What a Lady Wants, and I listened to the audiobook of that back in October. And to be honest, I really didn't enjoy that one, so I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about this book, as the plot sounded even more outrageous than the last one. So this story follows Sir Dominic de Lacy, who is nearing 30 and who realizes that he really should marry someone, have a family to secure his future, but he doesn't really mind who. So his father and this other man have settled this arranged marriage, and he thinks, all right, fine. He meets her, thinks, yeah, she's nice. But then, a few nights into them knowing each other, she pulls him aside and tells him a huge secret. That she is not, in fact, Mariah, but she is Mariah's twin sister, Margaret. Her twin sister has gone missing, however, and so the two of them have to team up to find Mariah. However, as you can imagine, romance ensues, and Sir Dominic begins to wonder if he's engaged to the right sister after all. I could not get over that plot, to be honest. I was prepared to find it absolutely ludicrous, but strangely enough, it wasn't as ridiculous as I thought it would be. I still wouldn't say that it was my favorite. It was just a middling read, and it was also not nearly as spicy as the last Emma Orchard that I read. I don't particularly mind spice, but I wasn't sure if that was a hallmark of Emma Orchard novels or not. I mean, there is some spice, it's not completely closed door, but I think the amount of spice in the last one I read was a function of its plotline more than anything else. So overall, a middling read, but if you are desperately awaiting the new series of Bridgerton, Emma Orchard might be a good place to try. I was also approved to read Kilted Lovers by Megan Clausen. And this is the first Megan Clausen that I read, even though I have her first book here on my TBR for this month. Honestly, I'm intrigued by her as a person. She has lived at the Tower of London for a number of years because her father was a beefeater, her husband is some sort of royal guardsman as well, and I just think all of that sounds fascinating. All of her romance novels, therefore, tend to feature either the Tower or royal guardsmen in some way, shape, or form. So in this, we follow Lady Alice Walpole, who is a young, distant member of the royal family who's been partying a bit too hard, seeing all the wrong men, and her family can't deal with it anymore, and they ship her off to Balmoral for the summer to get her act together. While she's there, she goes through an enormous amount of personal growth herself, and she learns how to deal with her own mental health issues while possibly beginning to fall for the king's piper who is working there. This one I enjoyed more than Emma Orchard. I am a sucker for anything featuring Scotland and pipers, of course. I thought this was a really interesting way to look at what it's like to be minor aristocracy. I thought their portrait of King Charles was actually quite fun, and I can't imagine that this is what he might actually be like. I never expected him to make an appearance, and it's still quite odd to have the king making appearances rather than the queen, but that's another story. I will say that exploring Lady Alice's mental health journey at times was incredibly uncomfortable for me as a reader, but obviously what she's going through is incredibly uncomfortable. And it's something that Megan Clausen opens up about at the end of the book. She has personal experience dealing with these issues herself, and I applaud her wholeheartedly for putting her experience out there and sharing it with others. So that shouldn't put you off from reading it. It was still incredibly enjoyable, but if that could be a trigger for you, that's something to bear in mind. Then finally, I was approved to read the new Laura Wood novel that's coming out this summer called Let's Make a Scene. As you can tell over here, I have 3 of Laura Wood's young adult novels. I read her young adult retelling of Pride and Prejudice. That was one of the first arcs that I ever received on NetGalley. But I hadn't read any of her adult romance novels that she's apparently been writing. This is technically a sequel, but it works very well as a standalone, though I'm sure you'd get more out of it having read the first book. That first book is called Under Your Spell, apparently, which I now have to hunt down. I also want Laura Wood's spy novels. I cannot find them here. Hoopla keeps claiming they have them, but they have them in German, which does me no good at all. Anyway, in Let's Make a Scene, we have an enemies to lovers and fake dating romance between 2 former co-stars who have had a rocky relationship for over a decade now. However, now in the modern day, Cynthia Taylor is experiencing a huge tabloid scandal. She's worried that her reputation will never survive, but her agent comes to her with an offer. Her breakout role was a small period drama that has become a cult favorite, and there's now the opportunity to make a sequel to it. and fans are drooling over the idea, and she thinks it will be a great way to put Cynthia back in a positive spotlight. In addition, they're looking to make a behind-the-scenes documentary for the fans to experience what it's like making the sequel, to see the actors grow with these roles, they're changing ideas. And so, as a further publicity stunt, her agent suggests that she and Jack, her co-star on both of these films, should pretend to be dating. Not doing a huge amount, but doing just enough, giving them tiny, tiny hints to the press that will surely fan a tabloid fire. Cynthia isn't entirely sure, as she and Jack have seemingly never gotten off on the right foot, but she agrees that it could be a decent plan, and Jack agrees as well. I really enjoyed reading this book. I think, as someone who loves Regency set ideas, it was a really fun book to read. As a repressed actor, I love living vicariously through views of behind-the-scenes type stories. And the romance was quite sweet and quite fun. It does get spicy, just as a warning. It is an adult novel. But overall, it was cozy and comforting and everything I wanted out of a romance book. Then finally, one of my library holds came in, as I suspected it might this month, and so I read You Deserve Good Gelato by Casey Rose. Casey Rose is a content creator on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram. She is a former Broadway dancer who took a chance one day and finally booked that trip to Italy that she had always dreamed about taking, and fell in love in every possible way. She loved the cities that she saw, the food that she was eating. She learned an incredible amount about herself and met her now fiancé. After the shutdown, she and Dario decided to move back to Italy together, and that's when she started creating content about her life as someone who has moved abroad, as an American living in Europe, and created content about culture shocks that she was having and her journey trying to learn Italian and homesickness, and now has a business partly running tours and helping other tourists plan their visits to Italy, hoping that they will have just as wonderful and eye-opening a time as she did. So this book is about her thought process on why she moved abroad, why she loves living abroad, tricky things that she has had to deal with, how to deal with culture shock, language learning, how to get out of your own way, and the fact that, yes, you will get homesick. There will be things that you do not enjoy about the country that you move to, but overall, it is still so worth it. And I really enjoyed her perspective. It was semi-inspiring. I'm still way too much of a chicken to really truly consider this, but it has definitely gotten subtle wheels turning in the back of my head. I also greatly enjoyed her chapter on things that she will never understand and does not like about living in Italy. I read them aloud to my parents as well. As someone who has Italian heritage in her family, these are things that we have complained about for years, and it was so validating to see someone else noticing these things and sharing them. Then, as I mentioned, I've been listening to more of my audiobooks at a time, so I actually read 3 audiobooks this month. The first 2 are part of a series, and the first one is The Empire by Michael Ball. Michael Ball is a major musical star. He's been a West End star for decades now. He's also a Radio 2 personality, and my family have loved listening to his show for many, many years now. And my mother actually was the one to discover that he had written these 2 books. And when I found out that I could get the audiobooks through my library that he narrates himself, I leapt on them and grabbed them with both hands. There's just something so wonderful about having someone whose voice is already a comfort to you reading his own fiction to you. And it's fiction that surrounds the theater, and you can tell how much it means to him. The Empire is a novel set in the 20s about Jack Treadwell, who has returned from living in France for a while after the end of World War I, and who is trying to start his life over. His parents have both died, but his mother directed him to the Empire to talk to Lady Lassiter, and she is confident that Lady Lassiter can help him. The minute Jack walks into the theater, he is swept up in everything that's going on in putting on a show and falls in love with it immediately. And we meet a huge cast of characters on stage and backstage who are more delightful than the next. A romance blooms, danger looms. It's everything I want out of a historical fiction novel. There's romance, drama, intrigue, comedy. It was a delightful listen, and I feel like I can't really describe the plot too much more without giving certain points away, but it was just a delight. Such that when I finished it, I immediately borrowed the sequel, which is A Backstage Betrayal. So we continue to follow Jack and Lady Lassiter and Grace and all of our beloved characters from book one as the Empire continues to try to grow as a theater. But he also adds some new characters in, and we start by meeting our first new character, Sally Blow, who is a young single mother and her child is quite ill. And at that point, I wasn't entirely sure what to think. I wasn't too keen on Sally because we didn't know that much about her at the time, and I was just expecting to jump back in with our old favorite characters. And for a long while, it's not clear how Sally is going to fit into the Empire. How are these plots going to connect? But when they do, it is amazing. The ending is extremely stressful, and unfortunately, I was listening to it while I was running errands on a very stressful day, and I just could not handle all of it at once, but I had to find out how it ended. Oh, and it's perfect. As much as there are high stakes and high drama, they are still very cozy, and they still always have somewhat of a happy ending, which makes them all the more comforting. You know everything's going to turn out all right in the end. And I really hope that he's planning a third book in this series. A Backstage Betrayal just came out a few months ago, so I'm sure we won't hear for a while, but I'm really, really hoping there's a third book, and I will absolutely be buying it as soon as there is. And I will absolutely be buying it as soon as it is out. And the last audiobook that I finished in March was Misdirected by Lucy Parker, which has two narrators. It is partly narrated by Nicola Coughlan, who you might know from Bridgerton, and partly narrated by Gwilym Lee. Oddly enough, this seems to only exist as an audiobook. There is no physical book, which I'm sort of disappointed by. If there were a physical book, I would absolutely buy it. This book is delightfully meta. This is another enemies to lovers romance centered around two actors who are filming a period drama. And yes, I was listening to this while also reading Let's Make a Scene. That at times got very confusing. I usually try not to do that, but this is how it turned out this month. Not only is it a story about two actors falling in love on the set of a period drama, narrated by Nicola Coughlan, who is in Bridgerton, but the drama they are filming is very clearly lampooning Bridgerton. It is a very sexy, very camp period drama called Leicester Square. And they do make sure to say further on in the book that it is Victorian, not Regency, but still I couldn't help but picture Regency dress whenever they mentioned any of the scenes that they were filming. Our main character, Hattie, has just dropped into this role. She had no previous acting experience, but due to the show's success, it has skyrocketed her into fame. And she's not always sure how to deal with it or if she likes it. Not only that, due to fan demand, Hattie's character will now have a romantic plotline this season with the character played by Anthony Rafe. And Hattie cannot stand Anthony, and she thinks that he can't stand her either. She thinks that he is cold, stuck up, and just utterly insensitive. However, as they begin filming this season and navigate getting to know one another, having to film a lot of romantic scenes together, having to coordinate sex scenes together, she discovers that he's actually a lot deeper than she thought he was. And of course, as you may have guessed from the two narrators, we do get to hear from both her and his perspectives. Although oddly enough, that perspective shift doesn't always line up with the chapter breaks. So it was very disconcerting just being in the groove, listening to Nicola Coughlan's lovely soothing voice, and then all of a sudden having a deep man's voice coming out of the speakers with no warning. But it was a delightful read. It was clearly written with such a love for period dramas, and I love how many little niche references Lucy Parker dropped into this script. Like the fact that Hattie has two fish named Knightley and Wentworth. Like the fact that they reference John Thornton as being one of the top tier period drama heroes. They even reference the trumpet player from the Muppets, Lips, and they reference him by name later on. I was texting all of my Muppet-loving friends going, "This is such a niche reference, what are you doing?" So Lucy Parker, if you're watching, I would love to be friends. I get all of your references, and I love what you did with them. I would also love it if she wrote more in this vein. I don't know if she has any more ideas for romances in a similar storyline, but if you do, Lucy, I would absolutely read or listen to them. So those are all of the books that I read in March. I was feeling quite badly because I only had one physical book to show for it, but I've actually read a lot more than I thought I had, which is quite cheering. I do want to balance it out and start reading more physical books, but as I've said before this year, a book is a book, and any reading is good reading. Let me know down below what your favorite read of the month is, if you also read and loved any of these books, or if you have recommendations for me based on the things that I've mentioned here. Until next time, be safe, be well, and happy reading. Bye, everyone.